I want to talk about the law of polarity from the micro to the macro level, beginning with energy. There is positive and negative. We see how these polarities work together. Now there is light and dark, day and night, hot and cold, and these two polarizing energies are always circulating each other, existing together, working together or working separately as they are. And so we can accept that. We experience that in our everyday. It is a part of our nature and the laws which we live by, where we sleep at night and we wake during the day, and certain things happen at night versus the day, and we experience different environments, whether it's hot or cold. This is simple to accept. So we take it to the next level, our relationships, feminine, masculine energies, not just man or woman, but the energy of an archetype of feminine and masculine itself. So in a relationship, there is a polarity. So Tony Robbins talks about this. He mentions the law of polarity and how it works in relationships. How when the feminine feels unsafe, there becomes an opposite reaction, like Newton's third law of motion. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. So she begins to become controlling, less open, less emotional, wanting to take the reins. The masculine, feeling controlled, feeling not trusted, feeling questioned, will begin to lose direction, a lack of will, and the ability to make decisions. We see this depolarization from an environment which does not allow its natural energy to be expressed. We can bring this back to the biological level with plants. For example, certain plants need certain conditions to survive, or it needs an ample amount of space to thrive. So we can accept that. We can bring it back to our relationships. Relationships, there needs to be a certain level of expression within feminine and masculine, and how it works together. That's how it harmonizes. Otherwise, we get depolarization. Depolarization is what's happening when the relationship is falling apart. It is not quite working. It could work in a volatile way, but it's not joyous. It's not enjoyable. Most of the time, people aren't happy when there's a depolarizing depolarization happening in the relationship. So we see that affecting our one-on-one relationships. We can see it affecting the family. So if there's a mother and a father, or just a feminine and masculine upholding the structure of the household, someone who's, say, the more creative, free-flowing, open-hearted, soft, malleable, and the person who's holding the structure, creating that. We see that having too much of one or the other can be an imbalance, but it's okay the way it is. But on its own, that's where it begins to be like there's not as much action happening. So if we connect this again to a micro level, the neurons in our brain, at its resting potential state, it has negative ions. Positive ions are surrounding it with potential of action. It receives signals. It creates this flow of positive ions and negative ions interacting with one another, which stimulates enough energy and momentum to create an action, which is when it sends the signals to create neurotransmitters, which creates a feeling that's being released in the brain. So something is happening due to this working together of two polarized parts in action. So in a relationship, it's working because there are two parts that are working together. So we take this out from the family dynamic into our society, into politics. There's right and left. We can see the conservative side is a good example of masculine. structure, conserving traditions, upholding certain values, very direct cardinal energy versus left being very open-minded, free-spirited, very soft and understanding. And it's funny because as I describe this, we don't see that so much to the levels that it was before, like to what it really was originally, the right and the left. Even the left, the left side of the body is feminine, right side masculine. Left side of the body is actually the right side of the brain, which is the creative, and then the left side, the logical, analytical, mathematical side, which controls the right. So we see that even biologically, yet again, there is a working of opposites. So bringing it back to politics, when the right and left depolarizes, which is what we're seeing, the left is wanting control, restriction, censorship, and the right is actually fighting for more freedom. So there's a depolarization happening, just like we see in the example that Tony Robbins talks about with feminine and masculine in a relationship. The relationship is no longer working. What happens when the relationship isn't working? It's falling apart. So we see this happening with liberals and conservatives. It's not working, and there's a clash, and it can't separate. It can't quite separate unless there's a complete dismantling happening. But if we want it to work out, there has to be a compromise and acceptance of roles, acceptance of values on each side, and that it has its own part to play together. So accepting things as they are allows proactive solutions to arise versus more damage, trauma, and destruction. So let's take it to another level of macro, karma, and an aspect of law, punishment, right? So the concept of law, punishment, it comes from fear. It works because of fear. So when there's injustice, how do we deal with it? We set out punishments that people have. So is fear an appropriate solution? That's the question here. Is that working? So let's bring it to a level we can understand. There's rebels are created because of the restrictions within its environment. And rebels, a prime example of a rebel would be a teenager. If the teenager isn't free to express its wild desires, then it will oftentimes do it even more so. And if, say, the teenager submits to its rule, there's a lot of internal unrest and resentment that boils up and expresses itself in different ways. And in Jung's perspective of therapy and psychology in general is that if something isn't consciously expressed, it will be expressed in the unconscious. And why is that? Because law of polarity, once again. If something, it has to go somewhere, right? It has to move, just like the neurons exchanging its positive and negative ions. It has to move, and that's the way things balance out. That's how it goes back to its resting state. So when it's not, there's this unrest, this dis-ease, and it manifests and festers from the inside out. So with that, we see that no, it's not quite a proactive solution to punish, to publicly shame or do unto others as we don't wish done to us. Just trying to make that work. But do unto others as you would have them do to you, right? The golden rule. Why is this the golden rule? So let's take it to another level of macro perspective. We are all one. And if we believe that, We would never treat anyone otherwise, because we are doing it to ourselves. We can't get away with it. The funny thing is, with the law and the physical aspect, in the way of control and punishment, we believe we can escape it, escape the law, and, escape the grip. And in a way, yes, we can. You can escape this control aspect, but you cannot escape divine law, the golden rule, or karma. So this is another level of macro, and this is where we lose some people. But how does this work? If we believe we are one, just as we see positive and negative ions working within one nucleus, within one neuron, within a nucleus, we see how it's always working with the law of polarity. So it just keeps extending outward into, if we are all one, the negative and positive is always balancing each other out. So no matter what we do will be done to us. What we are, we will experience the opposite, and vice versa. Both is always happening. Feminine and masculine exists within ourselves. It expresses itself in different ways, and it accepts what it is. My left hand is not trying to be my right hand, not trying to do things like why? This is what it is. This is what we have to work with. So that leads us back to acceptance. Acceptance that it is a divine law, that things are working in polarization. That leads us to that there is a divine justice that is playing out. So if we can accept and surrender to the divine justice, that it is also a law which we can accept, just like we see in the microcosm. We can understand the macro is exactly the same. It doesn't escape what is seen under a microscope. That is what is happening on a macro level. So that's the most expansive expression it could go to, is here we are experiencing the two sides of one coin spinning on its axis, just like a globe, just like a planet. In the same way it magnetizes and circles the sun along with all these other planets, and the way the galaxy circles, and how. And the more we accept these micro truths that are easy to witness and prove, we can begin to understand the macro level. And what happens when we understand and accept all of this? We cannot end or change circumstances for others. They must choose it for themselves, and that begins with acceptance. Control is a low-level awareness. Controlling those who do what we don't like is the same as they are exemplifying. It is a paradox. The law of karma is only a problem to micro man because he had more hate or negative thoughts and actions than positive, loving ones. At the macro level, people live by the law of love, which does not include penance. Its basis is joyous acceptance of whatever is as perfectly chosen by each soul for its own development. That is a quote from the book 2150 AD, describing how the law of karma works. It feels and can seem naive to believe that acceptance is the answer to dismantling resistance. But why is it that people believe in manifestation, for example? Or, just how biology and science works at all. If we can accept these micro rules of the fact that things work as they are and are working in a natural magnetic way that it has been set out to operate, then we can accept it and not work against it, as it is playing out just as it should. When we stop fixating on something, it comes to us with ease. The more we force something, the more we grip, the more it falls, right? Like the image of holding on to sand and how it seeps out the tighter you grip it. The more you want to confine your child, partner, friend, or loved one into a way of being that you want, the more likely it'll escape you. So there are these levels of truth in the law of polarity that allows us to accept things as they are, creating least resistance, creating harmony overall. I want to explain these things in a way that is logical, because on a human level, I am a skeptic, but I have come to learn grace, faith, and trust. But it doesn't come from a blind acceptance. It comes from experiencing it and recognizing that it reflects everything around me. That is something I believe I can accept. A truth that is universal. And I believe it's necessary and natural for me to share it. I never know how to begin and end these things. Thank you for listening. I will continue to share as it comes through and wishes to express itself. I would love to hear anything at all.